This is the Key to the Kingdom podcast, where we explore how the psychedelic renaissance becomes accessible to everyone. I'm your host, Tammy Sanders, and I'm glad you're with us. Thanks so much for listening. Vince Kadlubek is an artist and co-founder of Meow Wolf, an arts production company that creates immersive, multisensory experiences designed to transport participants into fantastic realms. Along with its original 20,000 square foot installation in Santa Fe called the House of Eternal Return, Meow Wolf opened a second experience in 2021, the 50,000 square foot Omega Mart in Las Vegas. And a third experience is on the way, a 90,000 square foot immersive art park in Denver. In describing a Meow Wolf art experience, participants and observers sometimes use the same language that psychonauts use to describe their psychedelic experience: mind-bending, time warping, reality shifting, consciousness expanding. Inspired by psychedelics, which he first encountered as a teenager, Vince sees the parallels between exploring oneself and the world through psychedelics and engaging in similar exploration through creativity, play, and imagination. Vince's keys to psychedelics access, imagination, exploration, and embracing the unknown resonate with his life as an artist. In this conversation, we discuss how Meow Wolf in particular, and creativity in general, can be a kind of expansive psychedelic experience for people who don't necessarily want to do psychedelics. Vince, thanks so much for joining me. It's great to have you.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
This comes at an opportune time for me. I don't know if it's a good time for you, but it's a good time for me because I'm working on a book in relation to Keys to the Kingdom, how the psychedelic renaissance becomes accessible to everyone. And I'm in the beginning part, I'm writing the beginning part of the book, which I call the origin story. It's my origin story, sort of how I came into psychedelics. I've written the part about the thing that happened before I started psychedelic journeys. And now I'm getting to the part where I'm starting psychedelic journeys. And engaging in psychedelics taught me the word ineffable, the indescribable, that which is beyond words, which is a primary mode of expression for our consciousness. So now I'm working on this book, and this book is made out of words. And I'm at the section where I have to tell my psychedelic origin story and talk about these life-altering experiences I've had. And so these parallel universe level changes that I've gone through, and my pages are blank. I have no words. I need some expression beyond language. It's something I need art.
Yeah.
Right? I realize I need art. So I need you to just finish this part of the book for me. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's within it's within the soup of imagination where the jewel of psychedelia really, I think, sits. It's like it's the access to the soup of imagination.
Yeah.
And
I like that, the soup of imagination. I like that. So I am swimming in the soup of imagination.
Exactly.
Trying to find words right now. That's
yeah,
it right
and it's not to say that the soup of like a lot of people, when they think of imagination, they think fake, but like the imagination is not fake. The imagination is all around us. Like if anyone listening to this was to look around their space, whether it's their living room or their car, or wherever they're listening to this, their office space, ask yourself how many things around me right now that are real originated from the imagination, and it's pretty much everything, around us. And so that soup of imagination is not just like some fake delusional place that doesn't have any relevancy. It's actually like the core of where creation comes from.
Yeah, it's the beginning of all things. It's interesting that you say that, because I've been thinking about that a lot in relation to my food. And just since coming into psychedelics and coming into consciousness in a I think a deeper way, I have this incredibly deep mindful appreciation of my food. And the other day I was like, somebody invented butter. And there's someone on the planet who is related to the person who invented butter, and we don't know who that person is. Like like we all have these connections back to creativity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that like even outside of human touch, like humans are incredible vehicles for creativity. Obviously, you see it all over the world. For better and for worse, like we're just amazing vehicles for creativity. Especially when we can quantify and create a value system around time, because creativity happens through a passage of time, and unless you can quantify time, you can't have a very solid mechanism for creation, since creation needs time to happen. And so capitalism and the money, the dollar was a way to value time, and that rapidly increased our ability to be able to create from the imagination. So humans are really obviously quite remarkable at creativity. But I would argue that like any creativity, comes from the same soup. That like even the creativity of nature, of what we know as nature, just plants and animals and life, is coming from the same soup. The vehicle is a different vehicle. It's not the human brain that's creating these things, but the starting point, I would argue, is potentially the same starting point, which is the infinity, which is the zero, which is the everything, which is the thing beyond time and the thing that's beyond words, as you were saying.
Bringing us back to it. And
Yeah.
for folks who don't understand what in the heck we're talking about right now, that's understandable, right? Because I didn't understand it until I had my first LSD journey, which threw me into infinity and threw me into this creative loop. I had the feeling of being created and recreated when I was in the midst of my LSD journey. I actually could feel the force of creativity making me and remaking me. And so I do now sort of connect to this notion of this creative vibration, or being in this creative soup. And I do understand that the words will come to me when that creative swim like flows my way. I can't force them out of me. That it is, the creativity really truly is its own process. But it definitely is unnerving when a book deadline is sitting in front of you.
How long ago was that first LSD journey for you?
My first LSD journey was last year in August.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
And those for me, they were actually arduous journeys. They were long and arduous journeys. And then I was introduced to 5-MeO DMT. The amount of insight that you can get in like a fraction of the time, and the drive and just compulsion now that I have to create and expand and explore, it's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. The Bufo experience is really gets to what you're saying. It's beyond words. I mean, as words come back into presence, you actually have that moment, or I had that moment where I was conscious to the fact that words were descriptors, or they were definition. They were breaking up an experience into compartmentalized parts, like like words, like language breaks apart the everything into compartmentalized parts, that allows us to be both an observer and creator of that, from that soup. Like we can observe it and define it and break it down into a million different fractals, and call that a plant, and that a lamp, and that a wall, and that a car, and have these different compartmentalizations through language. But that's all fabrication. That's all like the byproduct of something else that does not have differentiation, that does not have distinction, that does not have compartmentalization, is singular. Something else that is singular, that then we then create fractal from.
Yeah, we create sort of pieces and sort of consumable pieces from those things.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we make the everything. Yeah, we make the everything consumable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So getting into that, I really appreciate being able to just talk with you about this. Getting into that, we talk about Meow Wolf as a multimedia art and immersive storytelling entity or organization. For me, this actually seems like a gross understatement. I have the sense of Meow Wolf being a multi-sensory, multi-emotion organization. And so I just wonder, what your thoughts are about as I describe it like that, sort of, what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, I mean, the question of what Meow Wolf is like, obviously it's very layered and it's storied and it has evolved over time. It's like, it's kind of like the question of who am I as an individual, and trying to define that. And there's who I've been, there's the past that I've lived, there's the various iterations, there's all the layers of who the entity is. Then also at the end of the day, like it's important for all entities, like in order to have, form and function, to kind of define what you are and what you're doing, like define who you are by what you're doing, by what you're, by kind of your direct path, so that you can keep yourself on that path, and you can also be successful and make money and stay sustainable. And so, I'm sure like if someone was to ask you like, who are you, you have all sorts of ways that you could go, but you're probably going to land on, being you're writing a book, you're exploring psychedelics, so you kind of stick to that. And so like,
wait, so like essentially like who I am is what I do. Like I think that's what I hear you saying. And we hear that all the time, especially in business, like who you are is like the first question you ask someone in business is, what do you do? Which is a way of saying, who are you?
Yeah, for sure. And so like, that's why, at the, we are a lot of things, and we are touching on many different aspects. We're a company that wants to inspire creativity in people's lives, because we think that the imagination is capable of transforming our world. And so that's like really at the core of like the mission, is that it's through art, exploration, and play where we can inspire creativity in people. And it's because of this belief that the imagination is where transformation happens. Imagination is where creation happens. And so but our product that we have right now is these immersive, like the way that we deliver that is through these like large scale immersive multimedia experiences, artful creative experiences that are trying to attempt to subvert people's understanding of reality and break it, and allow for there to be an opportunity for possibility to come into their being. And so, but that's done through these like, the way that it's all paid for is that people pay, $25, $35 to go inside of a large scale art exhibition. That is fun. That's like not heavy handed. That's not like trying to teach you a lesson or anything like that. Like it's meant to be accessible, and it's meant to be fun, because that's an important part of this whole thing. And but at the end of the day, we want people walking out of our exhibition saying, that changed my life.
So you're saying there's not a sign over the door in Santa Fe or Las Vegas or soon to be Denver. There's not a sign over the door that says, enter here to break your reality.
Right. No,
like
you're
not.
Yeah. That what, and the funny thing about that is that that's like, a really critical component to how people break their reality inside of the Meow Wolf space is by choosing it. Like, it's not directed, it's not told to you by someone else. Like that's antithetical to the process of transformation. Like, we start with a space that's unfamiliar, which is the large scale art exhibition. You buy a ticket, you go inside. Once you're inside, we provide you total agency, like to do whatever you want. There's no path to go on. There's no task to try to complete. There's nothing you have to do. There's no transformation you have to go and try to have, for yourself. And so you have agency. People then with that agency will choose to do something very basic, which is explore. And so it's from choice that then comes exploration. And then through exploration, then comes discovery. And discovery is kind of the aha moment. It's the big moment for that person. and they have to have discovered that for themselves, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then the critical context for that whole very basic cycle, agency, exploration, discovery, the context must be a context of the unknown. Mm-hmm. Like if you provide a known context, a knowable context, then there isn't going to be exploration within it. So if you put a list of rules, or you create something that somebody's seen before, or
tell people what they're supposed to be doing, which is you're supposed to be breaking your reality.
Exactly. That ends up becoming a known context, and then they don't explore, and then they don't discover. So it's really important to be within that unknown space. And that unknown space is also where possibility exists when you're in an unknown context. And so all of this ties back to psychedelia, of course, because the psychedelic experience breaks you out of the known context and provides you a context of the unknown for a period of time. And within that space of the unknown, there's exploration and there's a discovery that's then possible for yourself and how you view yourself, or how you view the world, or your family, or your community, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So there's two things I want to actually talk about. And I've heard you talk about this notion of the agency, exploration, discovery, unknown in other places. And one of the things I think is really interesting, important, I was talking with a young man in my life about power and agency. And he said to me, what's agency? I've never heard this word before. Like, what does this mean? And I certainly had my response to him, because I've thought a lot about agency, especially, because of psychedelic exploration. The way it allows me to think now is with a lot more dexterity and depth. And I've come to sort of nuance that I didn't have before. So, moving sort of from power, which I believe is kind of a primal concept, to agency, which I think is sort of a more mature and layered concept. But I'm curious, before I pontificate about what I think agency is, I'm very curious how you would define it. And especially in context of Meow Wolf, when you say like people have agency, so what is that? What is it they have?
Yeah, they have the freedom to choose for no other reason, just for no other reason than because they chose it. I think.
So is it like autonomy then?
Yeah, it's autonomy. It's also being in the presence of meaninglessness, like detaching the meaning for the choice. Like, because if you have meaning behind the choice, then it's not actually necessarily you doing the choosing. It's some other excuse or some other meaning that you've given to why you chose the thing you chose.
So it might be like the choice actually might be already kind of constructed for you. You were actually just stepping into it, as opposed to you were driving it completely.
Yeah, based on meaning, or based on reasoning, or based on various past-based identifiers. Like, I did this because of this, or I'm making this choice because of these things, because this is who I am, because these are the things that I want. All these reasonings for it. But I think at Meow Wolf, because it's such an unknown environment, and there's no, you don't even know what the meaning is to any of this. And so when you're making a choice to open this door, or making a choice to climb up that tree, or whatever it might be, you're doing it. You're the one doing it. And that's it. It's not any other excuse. So I think that it's autonomy, and it's freedom, and but the choice is also, because the choice at Meow Wolf is, and it's not just Meow Wolf, it's art in general. Like, creativity and art allow for these types of explorations of the unknown to occur. And so, but the chooser isn't just, getting to freely do whatever, they're creating their next moment. And so I think it's within agency, and it's within choice, that the creation of the future happens. Yeah. And that's the manifestation of who we are going to be, or that's the manifestation of who the world might be, and that's happening through our choice. And so you you get close to that muscle, whatever that muscle is, that is the chooser inside of us, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What I hear in that too, I think does resonate with some of the ways that I think about agency, which it is an exertion of your power. So power is integral to agency. It is an exertion of your. Is that you or me? I'm hoping that's you.
That's me. I'm trying to
Okay.
kill all my Facebook, my Facebook windows. Hopefully that worked. Okay.
Stop, everyone. I'm having some moments with Vince here. Just stop for a minute. You can have him back in about an hour. Okay. So it is an exertion of your power. And it is an expression of your freedom, your independence, but it's combined with sort of an ownership of those things and a responsibility for those things that doesn't lie anywhere outside of you. So it allows you to both serve yourself and then also to serve others. Like that's how I think of and distinguish between agency and power. Whereas power, tends to be or is at least sort of the impetus for it can be quite self-serving. But agency is sort of that power and that independence coupled with complete ownership and responsibility for the outcome. So if you don't have a great experience at Meow Wolf, it's not Meow Wolf's fault. Like you went in there and made a bunch of choices, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. And that does tie to like what I was saying there, which is that, as long as you are, kind of blaming your choices on a bunch of reasoning, then the reasoning is the one that you can point to and say, that's why I feel the way that I feel. Whereas in the sense of choice and agency that we're talking about, it's decoupled from that reasoning, and it's your choice, it's yours. And there's a real power to that. And, it's actually something that kids feel all the time. It's like a kid, because when you enter the world as a kid, you are an explorer of this unknown land, and you're kind of, and it's playful, and it's always, you're kind of, you're learning about your power as someone with agency. Mm-hmm. And then what we do is we create constructs of the world, and we all have our own little individual version of that construct of how the world is, what I'm good at, who I am, all these like identifiers, and those then become the things that drive our choosing. Those are the things that drive our agency, and we're always kind of like, we always end up kind of being a victim of the context that we've created for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it's all past based. It's all like, the world is this way because of something that happened in the past, or I'm this way because of something that happened in the past.
And I would say that those things actually they don't drive our agency, they actually deprive us of our agency, like for those very reasons. Yeah. And the reason this matters is because I think if we step into agency, then we step into access, right? That it is important for access to understand and own your ability to choose. That, no one's here trying to make people do psychedelics or make you have a psychedelic experience. It's about sort of giving people the access so that they could exercise agency over the choices they want to make about who they are and how they live.
Yeah, for sure. And it's hard for people to find those access points. Like the world is, especially the westernized world that we live in America. I mean, and just, even traveling outside of the country, even traveling to another continent is a potential access point for having a breakthrough, realizing that the past structures are just fabrications that we came up with, and there's actually a lot more out to the world. But even that access to being able to leave the country is not there, and I would say even going out into nature, like going on a hike, going on a multi-day backpacking trip or something, are access points into the same thing. But that's not as easy as it sounds, like whether it be because of, sort of cultural training, or, the choices that people have made around, how they spend their time, what their diet is, their relationship to the outdoors. Like, we've basically created a very defined existence for ourselves as humans, especially westernized American humans. that don't have many opportunities to break the norm, to
Yeah.
break these realities that we've constructed. And honestly, like, psychedelics are one of the most accessible ways to do that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
relatively safe,
Yeah.
to do that. So
Well, now, so here's the thing though, the relatively safe. By the way, do we need to give you a second to plug in? You're okay?
I'm good. Yeah,
Okay,
I
awesome.
moved into a room that didn't have as much background noise happening.
Okay, cool. Alrighty. So a couple of points there. I did not start hiking in the woods until I was in my 20s. And I didn't even realize that I had this notion in my mind from my Black Southern family. You don't go in the woods? What are you thinking? You don't go in the woods? Bad things happen when you go in the woods, right? I did not know that this was it just sort of had seeped into my subconscious. And then I moved to, have a long and varied life, and I moved it to California, and I'm dating someone who always hiked in the woods when she was younger, and she takes me to the woods, and I was like, oh my God, the woods are amazing. Like, and we're not going to die. Like, we're not going to get kidnapped. We're not going to the notion that we have these constructs that make it really hard for us to sort of break out of, our way of being, and that way of being, and or to even recognize that our way of being is constrained in the first place. When I think about this, so you say, psychedelia is an access point to break reality as one thinks they know it. But breaking people's reality sounds like an act of violence. Now, for me personally, I want my reality broken, because now, I mean, I can see, and I could see early on how constrained my thinking was. And I wanted my thinking opened, not constrained. But how do we not have it be terrifying for people? Like, think about, like, people working in corporate life, or parents with kids who want the world to be safe and secure and predictable. I mean, is it the case that, like, an experience like Meow Wolf is really just for teenagers because, their parents aren't going to go to it? Like, how do we make this notion of breaking reality something that doesn't scare the nonsense out of people, so that it is actually accessible to them?
Well, the truth of it is that, are we breaking reality, or are we breaking a fabricated layer, a fabricated context that actually holds us back from being in touch with a more connected reality, that actually holds us back from being a version of ourself that is of our creation. Like, it should be viewed as you're actually moving yourself towards a being that's able to create what the world is around them, and who can create for themselves who they are moving forward. And it's real simple. It gives you the tools to access choice, to access possibility. And, I think if we frame it in a way where it's, yeah, you're totally right, where it's not this scary, like complete deconstruction of all that we know. It's actually it's actually a providing of the tools to create whatever it is that you want to know, to be able to, like, choose going forward. And I mean, I think the more that we have folks like you talking openly about this, and the more that we have folks like me talking openly about it, and, should people be afraid of psychedelic use or of any sort of transformational work? I would say fear is an okay thing to feel. Like, the unknown is a scary place. And that's why we build all the constructs we do to begin with. That's why we build all the walls and all the identifiers and all the borders. And that's why we build that context, is because we want to know, because in knowing is safe. So the unknown is inherently a scary place. But the more we can have folks who venture through the unknown and can speak to it, and can talk about the power, the tools, the elasticity, the empathy, the joy, connectiveness to nature, the connectiveness to the, to beauty, to the almighty, like
To self, to others.
Yeah, to self, to others. Exactly. The space that you have for people who are different, for the other, like, and can speak to that, then, like, yeah, like, is the journey still a scary journey? Yeah, it is. It's going to be, and, at times it's going to be, but there's enough evidence that you're going to be all right. Like, in fact, you're going to be better than all right. You're going to be empowered.
Yeah. And it is challenging. I get it. Like, there's a song that I love, and there's a lyric in the song though. all of my friends went crazy on LSD. And I'm like, you know, I get it. Like if you just sing that and say that at face value, that sounds bad, right? but but there's a degree to which I can hear a double entendre in that. Like, because to go crazy means, at least for me, to question the rules and be unaccepting of norms as as standards and fixed notions for living. And that's actually what it used to be determined crazy. Like you could get put in a mental institution because you refused to follow the rules, and you could get let out of the mental institution if you agree to obey the rules and you were super polite about them.
Right.
Right. So there's a degree to which I really do understand how this is challenging for people, this notion that, we're deconstructing and, we're to some degree going crazy.
Yeah.
And yet it's in that way of being that, at least for me personally, I have just found so much more depth and so much more possibility. I mean, and
Yeah.
especially, like, I say this as a BIPOC person, possibility and opportunity were not ways of thought that I had.
Yeah.
I never knew as a kid all the cartoons that I loved, like the Disney stuff. It didn't occur to me that was a job someone could do.
You're right.
Right? That people did a job that involved drawing cartoons. I don't know where I thought cartoons came from. I thought maybe they just came out of the sky. I don't know. But no one ever told me that
Right.
that's a possibility for you. So I think, I am just now in my freaking 50s discovering possibility, opportunity, and dreams. And I think, coming from a BIPOC perspective, I know that, a lot of it, but I don't think it's just BIPOC. I mean, I think a lot of people struggle with possibility, opportunity, and dreams for various reasons. They could be socioeconomic, they could be sociocultural, they could be familial. There are a lot of reasons why people struggle with opportunity, possibility, and dreams. And so I certainly, I was thinking about this question for you, that like, how do you define and understand psychedelia and the psychedelic realm? Like, is there a way to describe that without using the word psychedelic, which might completely freak people out? Is there a way to think about that? And I'm having this notion sort of around possibility, opportunity, and dreams, but I don't quite have it formulated yet. So I wanted to share this question with you and see what you might think.
Yeah, it's again, it goes back to the first conversation, or the first part of the conversation around imagination, and that it's, we think about imagination as being kind of this very lighthearted, la 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 imagination, daydreaming, this thing that doesn't really matter or something. But it's within the soup of imagination where possibility exists, where ideas come to fruition, where the future is our destiny. The future is who we are, because that's what we have the impact. That's where we have the impact to make. And the imagination is the ability to envision what could be. And then that's where possibility is. That's where dreams are. And, it's hard to have access there. I think really the reasoning that the imagination, the muscle of imagination, whatever that is not trained or is not encouraged in our society. I don't think it's anyone's fault. Like, it's the way that humans are wired. It's the way that life is wired. It's basically, we learn from the past. It's in the past where the dangers have existed. And then we build construct, and we basically, the more we know about our past, the safer we are today, is kind of like the way that we think about it. So when you're in school, the reason why art funding is cut, creative funding is cut, but we're doubling down on memorization of numbers and memorization of history, it's because we want to know our world in order for us to be safe today. But what the psychedelic experience does, what creativity does, what art does, is give us the ability to access not who we have been, but who we could be. So you flip it from I am who I have been, or the world is what the world has been, or my family is what my family has been. You switch it into I am who I am becoming. The world is who the world is becoming. My family is who my family is becoming. There's opportunity for us to be able to evolve those systems through choice, through imagination, through envisioning. And, I think that it's a relatively new world right now for us to be able to safely explore the future as the unknowns of the future, because we have had technology and infrastructure and all this like capital outlay infrastructure in our world, running water, grocery stores,
which I happen to like. I will tell you.
Totally.
I mean, I'll tell you this right now, and I have said this repeatedly. If a world event happens and there's no more Whole Foods, just like send me out. It's over. I don't want to live in a world where I can't go to Whole Foods, man. I'm into it now. I'm dedicated. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm committed.
No, but it's the what it allows us to do, like all this infrastructure, and then take the internet and take like that, all of our past based information is now stored somewhere. I don't have to have it in my brain. And like the safeties of everyday, first world safeties. And I know that like that's me talking as a privileged white person who has, like that there's a lot of people in our world who do not have the same safeties that I feel. But I think like as an overall trajectory, we're building an infrastructure where there's more and more capability for us to feel safe as to where we are, and then be open to the unknowns of the future, that we don't have to like, it's not survival based, like a lot of the elements of survival have essentially been taken care of by investments into certain infrastructures. And so now
but yet people feel so much anxiety. There's so much anxiety and so much like, we're not safe. Like at what point do we finally like say we have enough to be safe?
Yeah, totally. And that's exactly it. It's like, that's a byproduct, that feeling of like, I'm not safe. Therefore I have to build more walls. I have to build more contact. I have to be more scared of the other than I was before. Like that's a huge, that's something that we keep on going back to no matter how safe we actually are. And that really shows it's like, that's a psychological embedded component of being human. It's not an actual function of reality.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from that is, when I ask you this question, sort of how might you define and understand psychedelia without using psychedelics, or using the terminology psychedelics, what I'm hearing is, you could swap in sort of imagination as part of that, or possibility as part of that, sort of this expansion of imagination beyond the borders and boundaries of what are, to the focus on what could be.
That's correct. Yeah. And that, if it's, there's all sorts of like neurological evidence, I'm sure, that I don't know, because I haven't done much, but that shows that there's elasticity, that there's different communications happening, there's different brain activity happening. But really, ultimately, like what it feels like for me through the psychedelic experience is that I've had, at least for a moment in time, whether it be 15 minutes on Bufo, or 7 or 8 hours on LSD or whatever, that I have access, because that substance has moved me out of my context. It's moved me into more of the soup of imagination. And it's in that soup of imagination where I come from, where I've come from, where I create myself, or where myself has been created from. And then it's also the soup where I can now ongoingly create from in my life. It's where possibility exists, is within that imagination. And it gives you, if nothing else, it just kind of gives you a break from the formed structures, the knowable context, and gives you a little bit of a time within the unknowable context, which inherently gets your imagination moving. And I think what's important is that I have seen a lot of friends and people in my community take that access to imagination and create their own personal narratives from it, like their own personal definitions of the world, or like stories of the world. And I would just say that there is an important step to all this, which is to realize that the imagination actually is not inherently yours. We have access to it, but it's not inherently ours. It's not like Vince gets
what do you mean my imagination is not mine? It's in my head. How is it not mine? Right. It's in my heart. It's in my being. Totally. How is my imagination not mine? It's not yours. You don't get to have it. How's it not mine?
You'll hear like a lot of artists, it's kind of like the idea of like where collective consciousness comes from, or when ideas emerge at the same time across the world. Or artists say this a lot, where they say, I'm just the vessel. I'm just the in-between between this thing over here that I'm pulling from, and then the creation of it. And that thing that I'm pulling from is like, it's singular. There's no dividing it up. It's outside of time, it's outside of space. It does not have the structure to be divided, to be divisible. So it's not like I have an imagination, you have an imagination. We have individual vessels that are made up of physical matter that exist within time, that are able to break up the soup of imagination and express it in individual ways. But the soup itself is singular. It's indivisible. And you know, why it's important, I think, to respect that soup as a singularity outside of oneself is that the ego loss of psychedelic experience, giving up yourself to that imaginative force, to that imaginative soup, and realizing that that's something that we are all of, and it's not mine. It's a collective. That ego loss is a really important aspect of staying grounded within the co-created reality that we all exist in. That if you take that soup and you start to think that it's yours, and you start to think that like all these imaginative thoughts and all of these narratives are yours, you can go off track, and you can start to take the psychedelic experience, and it's not about rooting it to a humble reality. It's about going off on your own personal narratives. And I think that that's a fine line that, as we talk about psychedelic usage, shouldn't be forgotten. You know, that like it's not about yourself. It's about experiencing the whole, you know, the whole that's outside of ourself, that is actually interconnected with everything, you know?
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about that is when you talk about psychedelics as being able to sort of shift you beyond the context of just yourself. You know, I've actually had people ask me, well, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to shift out of the context? It's just myself. Like, I like myself. I'm fine with my context. That's completely okay. There's no sort of, argument against that. The question is always is, if you expanded that, how might that be of service to you and to the world? And so, sort of psychedelics being able to sort of help people shift out of that context to see what more might there be to be of service to yourself, your family, your ancestry, your lineage, and to the world at large. It also occurs to me that Meow Wolf is essentially like art for people who don't want to go to art galleries. I've heard Meow Wolf described like that, art for people who don't want to go to art galleries. It also occurs to me that it's art for people who don't want to do psychedelics. Right.
Totally. Maybe they do want to, but they're not going to. They're not going to look for it. They're not going to be the person who takes psychedelics. Like there might be part of them that says, "Hey, I'd love to have some sort of weird trip," But you're right. It's the opportunity to access the unknown, and it's an opportunity to access the imagination without having to mess with your brain in the way that you think that psychedelics do.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious in the beginning how you came into the world of psychedelics. I've heard you say that you hated school, and that you loved psychedelics. So I'm really interested, sort of, how did you come to hate school, and how did you come to love psychedelics? What did you love about it back when you were helping to found Meow Wolf?
Yeah, the school part, I mean, just systems in general were always really difficult for me. Like I always felt
but the systems are built for you, Vince. This is the part that doesn't make any sense to me. You're a cisgender straight white man. Dude, the system is built for you. That's what we're always talking about, right? That's what we're all mad about, is the system is built for you. And now you're like, I'm not into the system. Like, what's up?
Yeah. I had an interesting upbringing. I had two parents who were public school teachers. So we were, and two sisters, and we were, living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My mom was born and raised in Tesuque, New Mexico. And my family consisted of like all of my kind of immediate relatives were all, basically Northern Mexican, Hispanic families. I have a couple full-blooded Native American cousins, and I have a couple like first and second generation Mexican families. For the only really me and my sisters and my parents, out of the, maybe 50 people in Santa Fe who I would consider my immediate family, we were the only white ones. And I didn't really realize, it's like, I kind of knew this. I realized this when I was later on in years, like when I was in junior high, I was like, oh, this is interesting. But even the school I went to was like 75% Hispanic. All my friends were Hispanic. So, that sort of like recognition of white privilege didn't really come into or not even, but just white identity, I should say.
Yeah.
The recognition of white identity didn't come into play until I was like in high school, probably. And then the recognition of white privilege really only came into my viewpoint like within the last 5 years. But yeah, it's a good point. Like the systems are set up for folks who look like me. But growing up though, I felt a real rebellion against those systems and a real like connectivity to those who are who are left out of conversations in the system. I felt like I was left out of conversations, even as like an 8-year-old in elementary school, I felt like I don't have a place here. I don't have a voice here. And I remembered that feeling. And I also, as I grew up, closeted gay kid who was also into sports. So I was like playing sports with basketball, my friends who were on the basketball team and on the tennis team. But yet I'm a closeted gay kid. And so that was like really hard for me. And the system at the time, and I think even the systems today, but the systems in the 90s were a lot less, there for me. Everything I watched on TV was, oh my gosh, Ricky Lake, oh my gosh, you're, who's coming out of the closet, like this big deal. And so I felt a lot of like self-consciousness around that just from an identity perspective. And so I was real at a place of like identity crisis when I came out of high school, of like not comfortable with my sexuality, not comfortable with the world around me, feeling like everybody was out to get me. And
actually, can I say, so, wasn't it like, called out earlier, like you're a cisgender straight white man, how could the system be going wrong for you? And you're like, yeah, but I'm not like, and it's interesting that sort of the presentation that people might have in the world and all the assumptions that are made about that presentation. I think that, it's very easy to marginalize people based on who we think they are compared to like who they actually are and how they actually could be allies for us.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
It's really powerful.
Yes. I mean, yeah, thanks for saying that. I think it's important to have the recognition of these surface level identifiers and what they are capable of, the power that they have in our world. Like the fact that I'm white, I wear these glasses. I don't even need glasses, but I wear them because I know that people are going to respect me in a different way. I comb my hair the way that I do because I expect people are going to respect me in a certain way.
That collared shirt on.
Exactly. And it's important for us to understand that these identifiers, these like surface level identifiers, are powerful. And that should be called out. That should be something that we stay cognizant of. It's also something that we should also realize that, we are all much larger beings than the outward projection, and to give each other space to be that as well, Yeah.
And it's hard though. It's hard to not come at each other with our presumptions. It's hard to do that. And so I think sort of for me, at least having the consciousness disruptor of psychedelics,
for sure.
Right? Like that's a huge part of like why it matters, because it's this little sort of actually it's the unconsciousness disruptor, right?
Yeah.
Of the psychedelic experience, saying, you actually are built of a lot of assumptions, right?
Yeah.
Let's bring those to the fore and rattle those up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And see them for the fabrications that they are. See them for the simplicity that they are. We see this at Meow Wolf too. Like the context of Meow Wolf makes it so that there are a lot of different folks inside of Meow Wolf at the same time. And they probably have different political beliefs, and they definitely look different. They're of different ages, and they're of different size and shape and colors. And yet within the context of this weird world known as Meow Wolf, everyone has some amount of equality to them. Like they're all unfamiliar in an unfamiliar space. none of their previous makeups, beliefs, identifiers matter in that space. Like this is a removed space from that. And so that parallel between kind of the psychedelic realm that we create through Meow Wolf, through art and creativity and play and exploration, and the psychedelic experience that's produced by substances is, you know, the parallel there is very similar.
Yeah, because it's like all the currencies that you would deploy sort of out in the non-psychedelic world, like your money can't buy you anything in the psychedelic realm, right? That currency can't buy you anything in the psychedelic realm.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, your social currency is no good here.
That's right. And all of those, like me wearing a collared shirt, you know, and, you know, being a white man with glasses when I'm in the Meow Wolf world doesn't really matter, like in there. Yeah. Like it's, and so, yeah, you know, I think that's, and when I got out of high school, I was just kind of like built into this like system of self-inflicted identifiers, and also how those self-inflicted identifiers were at odds with the world, and how the world was at odds with me and my self-inflicted identifiers. And so it created such a tense relationship between me and the world around me. And I knew it and I felt it. And it was manifesting itself in very unhealthy ways, whether it be like my weight or my skin or my choices that I made. Like I was just lost. And I was lucky enough to have access as a 19-year-old to LSD, and began exploration on my own through LSD in very personal ways. Like I would take it at night by myself, nobody around. It wasn't a social experience for me. It was therapeutic. And I was also doing the same with marijuana and salvia, and then sometimes another substance known as DXM. And like I was just kind of exploring the psychedelic realms at that age, and I felt it breaking down my identifiers. And it allowed me to see that it wasn't the world that was the problem, it was my self-inflicted identifiers that were the problem. And that,
but you did all this work on your own. Like you didn't have anyone to guide you. I mean, it seems like without that guidance, you know, you could so go off the rails a little bit here, a little bit there. You know what I mean?
I think I was lucky in that way to have been brought up really well, having really good parents, to be in a fairly stable situation, to have a social scene that was like, you know, relatively stable and safe. It wasn't, you know, did I slip into some like weird cracks? Like I did, like some, you know, at times for sure. I had, you know, many months of one summer where I was living out of my car, and, you know, I was shoplifting all the time. Like there was different things that were happening in my years that were not good, you know, component parts of this. You know, when you start to break the system, you start to think that the entire system can be broken. And like, you know, the legal system, the justice system is not one that's easily avoidable.
Yeah, they're not up for a lot of wholesale change, right? Instigated by a 19-year-old. Right?
Yeah, and neither is really the system of like, you know, paying rent and like, you know, your car payments and stuff like. And I had to learn that. Like I was disintegrating all of the systems around me, and then I had to learn that there's, you know, that there's certain systems that I have to choose to participate in, or pay this,
or there's consequences. Yeah, there's just consequences. You can either participate in them, live outside of them, or go up against them. All of those are possibilities, and all of them have different sets of consequences.
Yeah, but that, you know, I was lucky enough to have I survive, you know, this self exploration and this self deconstruction without guides and without, and I wouldn't recommend it. You know, like I would say that having healthy, experienced folks who understand the psychedelic realm and understand the realm of transformation, like both for the before, during, and after, is like it speeds up the process. Like it speeds up the process of transformation. It speeds up and it integrates the process in a lot more cleaner of way than what I experienced as a young adult.
Yeah, with a lot less collateral damage.
Exactly, totally. Yeah. And I, you know, I'm lucky enough to have survived it. But then, you know, then through the years, it's become, you know, I took a decade off of not doing really any psychedelics, mostly just because I had a couple experiences that were really terrifying for me.
Mm.
And where my own insecurities, again, my own constructs were being compromised, and I was concerned with what was on the other side of that. And I wasn't making enough choices in my everyday life, strong enough choices in my everyday life to give myself the sort of footers or the sort of infrastructure to be able to explore the unknown safely. So it took me a while, like I basically through my 20s built, just kind of built up my own personal infrastructure, and then have re-experienced psychedelics in a more therapeutic fashion over the past 10 years. And it's been a remarkable way to be able to stay connected, with like the work that I do in the world, the mission as to why I'm doing that work, the
To
people
Vince.
that are around me, to me as just a
Yeah.
person that's alive in this small little window
Yeah,
of
for sure.
time.
I actually, you know what, Vince, I actually was going to ask you about that too. Like, do you have kids?
I don't know.
Okay, but you're a business guy. You're a collared shirt wearing business guy.
Yeah.
Out in the world. I was like, how engaged are you now, and like how do you engage, and what does it mean to be engaged? So I definitely hear that sort of the doing it now through ways that are maybe more structured and more rooted in support and community are a
Yes,
way to actually engage in psychedelics sustainably, as opposed to taking LSD in your room at night by yourself.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that like understanding, well, set and setting, I mean,
Mhm.
is obviously like critical to this. Really understanding that set and setting, and that there's different sets and settings for different intended uses.
Mhm. Mhm.
I know for myself that I'm not gonna trip at night in the dark, like
Mhm. Yeah.
unless I have guides around me, unless I'm going for an intentional
Yeah.
exploration of depth. Otherwise, I'm going to be caught in my head.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to be out in the world. My mind's going to get caught in my head in a
Yeah,
way that
or it's a little Russian roulette, right? Like maybe you'll have an experience that feels productive for you, or feels enlivening for you, or maybe you'll have an experience that feels terrifying for you, right? So and I think that those things also can happen. I certainly had there were some moments during my LSD journeys where I'm squeezing my consciousness back to the portal to humanity, and I don't know if I'm gonna make it. Like I had like a moment where like I don't know if I'm gonna get back into humanity, and I just am calling out for my guide, and she's there with me. I cannot imagine navigating that moment by myself.
yeah, for sure.
Not at
Yeah.
all.
And that's the case, for me, like with, community of friends and people that are aligned with that and understand it. And, it also, I've been I've been present to other people's guided experiences, and watching as like really, people who live and breathe this type of work, um, just watching how well they're able to bring people into and then through to the other side. And then how quickly, like, you don't need to do it often when you have a really strong
Mhm.
infrastructure there that knows what they're doing, that sees it as a therapeutic use. So
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I want to be really clear about something when I'm talking about therapeutic use, and I think this is the same for you. This doesn't mean like going to a doctor's office or like, some like a psychiatrist's office. It means, for me at least, when I say therapeutic, what I mean is having this intention of healing, growth, and evolution to my engagement in psychedelics. That's essentially what I mean by therapeutic. And that could
yeah,
happen in doing ancestral work in a community. That could happen one-to-one with a
yeah,
guide or with a therapist. But I just want to be really clear, like we're not talking about
sure.
sort of like medical facility kind of therapist
Right,
office with a couch
totally.
necessary.
And I think I'm also talking about, like, yeah, other folks who are sober, who are capable of anchoring the experience and integrating the experience into this constructed reality. And that integration is really important. The idea that psychedelics are this like escape and then you come back to life
Mhm.
is also, I think, it's a dangerous thought. and it's where people are often, can oftentimes go off on the wrong track. The integration process is like critical. The days after, the weeks after, the conversations about it, the journaling about it, and connecting it back to the life that we live, the world that we live in, is a really critical piece to it. And yet, not going to a doctor's office, though someday I think, we're on the path where that will be the case.
Sure. Yeah.
And in some cases, like, if you think about, ketamine therapy, there are now a lot here, we have actually a few in Santa Fe that are popping up where people are going to a more, kind of institutional setting and having, ketamine experiences.
Just want to be clear that like we're not constraining it to institutional settings when we say therapeutic. So in case that wasn't clear. So one of the things I want to ask you about, Vince, is sort of seeing myself in Meow Wolf. When I've done a bunch of prep, and when I see video of folks in Meow Wolf or folks engaging with Meow Wolf, the people who are presented, or as I identify them, and we've just talked about like those identifiers being constructs, right? Like they're surface level constructs, but as I identify people, I don't see BIPOC people there. It seems predominantly white. And, you've just talked about having actually a very diverse, upbringing in New Mexico. I've lived in that area. I have family from that area too. And I know it's very diverse and very multicultural. So I'm just curious about the ability for people to see themselves in Meow Wolf, so that this actually does become quite accessible. And it's not, because I'll be like quite frank, and Lamar Odom talks about this. There's an article I read recently where he talks about how, like psychedelics are for white people, and you do psychedelics as a black man or as a black person, and then the police think you're crazy and then they shoot you. Like, psychedelics are for white people, right? And so how do we ensure with experiences and organizations like Meow Wolf that like people can see themselves, so that this is not limited to some group that matches some surface level identifiers?
And I think that that's what's important too, is like, for Meow Wolf, like we create psychedelic work, but like ultimately what we're creating is like creative cultural expression. And I think that that's maybe a little bit of a shift that's happened, is it's like we've expanded beyond just this identifier of psychedelic, which is limiting, which I think does have cultural limitations, to then just being really about like the expression of imagination and the expression of the spontaneous moment, and being like on being in the moment of cultural creation. And that I think has a lot, obviously has a lot more range to it. And when you think about psychedelic pop, the things that come to mind are largely white folks. But if you dig deeper into historical cultural creativity or cultural expression, you actually find that like so much of the foundation for psychedelic art and psychedelic pop and psychedelic expression comes from non-white cultures. In our region, like the work of the Spanish work that you find coming out of Mexico City or out of Oaxaca is very psychedelic. The Native American work is very psychedelic, and we are influenced by that. And then I think what happened for us, or I can speak directly with me, like when we were producing Meow Wolf, it was very much, when Meow Wolf was first being created, it was a clubhouse. It was a social gathering. And it was like from the social gathering that then became the business, that then became the brand. But the social gathering was really just what we would say is that we were an open door creative, open door collective. Anybody could walk in the door, and we would welcome them in. In that way, we were inclusive. We were willing to work with anyone who walked through the door. In the ways that we weren't inclusive was that we were basically just in our clubhouse with the door open, and if you walked in, awesome. But we didn't go out and actually and seek, provide invitation and provide like outreach and say like, actually, we want to have different people who look different, who have different cultural upbringings as part of the group. We kind of just were the social group that we were, and then we said, come in. Of course, the people who are going to choose to walk through that door are people who are who feel comfortable walking through that door and look like us. And so I think what
Yeah, because I
happened,
mean, like I walk through the door and there's like not another person like me. I'm like, nah, maybe this is not my club.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that was like a, non-intentional way that we ended up becoming a largely white company, like internally. And then when you then create the work, you're creating the work from a cultural space, because we're not going to create the work from a non-white cultural space, because like we all obviously know that that's not what we're doing.
That's called
So,
appropriation, and you
yeah,
don't want to do that.
we're
Yeah.
not touching that at all. Like that's totally, so we're speaking from the spaces that we know, which tend to be like Jim Henson and the Beatles. And, I think that now the evolution has been, so I would say that like that the audience that have started to come through Meow Wolf are very diverse. Like it's a quite diverse group of folks who are coming through the experience and having a connection with it.
Yeah, I want to see like busloads of BIPOC kids like showing
Yeah,
up and like
totally.
with their parents in tow, right?
Yeah,
Like that's what
totally.
I want to see.
Yeah, and we've done, like in New Mexico, like we have a large Hispanic population, and we are very much beloved by Spanish, Hispanic folks, Mexican folks who are, who love Meow Wolf and love the Meow Wolf experience. I think as we move into, our larger markets, and as the company has grown, and as these things have become a lot more in our awareness, it starts with building a team internally that is diverse, and so we've made a lot of really great steps in doing that. And the artists that we work with, like when we go into Las Vegas or go into Denver, as we expand around the country, the artists that we work with are specifically artists that represent the wide range of diversity that city has as their makeup. So like in Denver, for instance, we're working with about 150 artists, of which more than 50% of those artists are non-white. And I think that through then the genuine expression of culture, and then people being able to see themselves and see their culture in the work, will then, I think, naturally and organically and authentically expand the diversity of the brand. And we're seeing that. We're seeing it happen, like, in real time. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's happening as the company evolves.
Yeah, interesting. So it'll be very it'll be worth seeing experiencing Santa Fe, and then experiencing Las Vegas, and then experiencing Denver as you all have evolved as a collective. So too should your work be evolving. So that would be the best way to fact check you, right? The best way to fact check is to go experience the work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I think that then, are the audiences responding to that work, and is the brand speaking to that same diversity? Is it reaching audiences in that same way?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Thanks for bringing it up. I mean, it's like, it's something that we've struggled with in the past, and we've admitting to it, and open to making the changes that need to happen in order to represent a larger group of people. Because at the end of the day, this is about creativity reaching the hearts of all people, like of all people, kids, grandparents, Trump supporters, Black folks, Native Americans. Like it's across the board. We want our experience to be inspiring, and to be a place where there's more space to meet each other without the identifiers and constructs keeping us apart.
Yeah, that separate us. Yeah.
I think that Meow Wolf and psychedelics have the ability to, soften those constructs and allow for more space for ourselves, and, to experience people more directly.
Fantastic. Vince, I want to thank you so much for the time and the thoughtfulness that you've given to our conversation. I do think that this art is absolutely a path to making psychedelics, and more important, I think, the benefits of psychedelics, the psychedelic experience, more accessible to everyone. I am looking forward to experiencing Meow Wolf myself. Haven't quite started traveling yet, but as soon as I do, oh yeah, I can imagine some wonderful experience there. So thank you for just giving us a lot to think about. And one of the things I think I want to do is I just want to put a QR code in the book when I get to the part
Yeah,
about the part about describing my psychedelic experience. Just put a QR code. You could just scan it with your phone and then just go to a film about Meow Wolf, because it sounds like there's definitely a capture there that really
sure.
could help people think differently, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Not, not being so scared of the other,
Yeah, yeah, for
being
sure.
open to the other. And if you get a chance to come to Vegas or come to Santa Fe, please let me know. The Vegas experience especially is, I mean, they're both amazing, but the Vegas experience is especially um, uh, influenced by the types of topics that we talked about today. So
Fantastic, fantastic. Thanks again, Vince.
thank
I'm sure
you.
we will meet again. Until next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
That wraps up another episode of Keys to the Kingdom. Thanks so much for listening. Check out the show notes for resources we discussed, and follow the Keys conversation on Twitter at Psychedelics Key. Until we meet again, remember, you are connected, you are love, and the kingdom is yours.